Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to IAB's Make Mobile Work webinar, User-Generated Content Effectiveness, What Works. My name is Julian Soler, and I'm the Director of the Mobile Marketing Center of Excellence here at IAB. I am joined here with my colleagues Nina Munoz, Director in the Video Center of Excellence, and Tofika Mohunadin, Coordinator in the Industry Initiatives at IAB. Thank you for joining us today. Nina and I will be your hosts and moderators for this afternoon's webinar. Before we start, just a little housekeeping. The way this will work today is all of our presenters will make their presentations, and then we will open the floor for questions. Everyone here on the line is invited and encouraged to ask questions along the way, which we will answer following the final presentation. To submit a question, choose the moderator chat button along the right-hand side menu of the BlueJeans app, type your question into the chat box at the bottom, and we will take it up following the final presentation. If you have a question for a specific presenter along the way, please add their name to the question as well so we can be sure to direct it to her or him. Additionally, the webinar is being recorded and a link to it will be sent to you via email once it has been posted to our website and YouTube. That should happen by the end of the day tomorrow. Today we'll be hearing from three industry leaders who will share their distinct and unique perspectives on user-generated content effectiveness. Brendan Mulvihill, SVP Head of Licensing at Jukin Media, will kick off the proceedings with a look at UGC for organic social. Following, Mike Griffin, VP of Global Customer Success at Olapic, will discuss building trust and driving conversion with UGC. And Ebony Newman, Chief Commercial Officer at Storyful, will wrap things up with insight on the powers and perils of UGC. And then the floor will be open for questions. IAB is excited about and grateful for each of our speakers' participation today, and we hope you find much value in what they share this afternoon. The rise of social and messaging platforms in recent years has empowered, quote, ordinary people to become avid and voluntary content creators, notably on their mobile devices. Advertisers have taken notice and are increasingly utilizing UGC to engage with customers in meaningful ways. In response to this growth and to answer marketer questions, IAB published the User-Generated Content for Marketing and Advertising Playbook this past May, the buyer's guide to help brands and marketers understand how UGC can help meet their marketing and advertising objectives. In it, guidance is provided on how to leverage UGC and includes case studies, actionable best practices, and importantly, legal considerations when putting this tactic to work. Among the key points in the playbook is an update to the definition of UGC, as distinct from influencer marketing, with the primary difference being whether a brand has a material connection with an endorser of a product as defined by the FTC. Any relationship between a brand and an individual that challenges the objectivity of what that individual shares relative to that brand must be clearly and conspicuously disclosed. We mention this up front to level set what will be shared today and to clear up any confusion that may exist between these two similar tactics. And finally, we would also like to take a quick moment to remind you about IAB's upcoming Inside Influencer and UGC Marketing Day, Monday, July 22nd here in New York. At this half-day event, which will be held at Viacom, industry leaders will share provocative insights on success strategies and pitfalls to avoid in UGC and influencer marketing. Additionally, Mamie Cresses, Senior Attorney in the Advertising Practices Division of the Federal Trade Commission, will discuss the importance of disclosure with helpful insights and suggestions to get it right. This free invite-only event is only for employees of brands and creative and media agencies, and you can request your pass at this link on the screen, which we will also share in the post-webinar email. Our presenters today will offer their unique perspectives on the benefits and best practices in UGC, the types of UGC opportunities available to marketers, and also watch-outs such as brand safety and usage considerations. And with that, turn things over to Nina.
Hi, everyone. This is Nina Munoz with the IAB. I am excited to introduce you to our first speaker, Brendan Mulvihill, SVP and Head of Licensing from Jukin Media. He will be speaking today about UGC for organic social. Brendan, I will now pass the floor to you.
Thanks, Nina. Thanks, Julian. I appreciate you having me here. Thank you to everyone for joining. I'm excited for everybody to learn about UGC and all the different ways you can use it. I will specifically be speaking about how brands can and should be using UGC as part of their organic social strategy. Before I dive into all that, as we move to the second slide, I'm going to show you a picture of my kids. In 2017, I dressed my kids up as Randy the Macho Man Savage and Hulk Hogan for Halloween, two of my childhood heroes. And I don't show this to you as a way to promote my kids in front of a bunch of brand marketers or agencies. I show this to you to remind everyone that we all have photos and videos just like this on our cell phones. They're videos of our friends and our family, with our pets, doing things that we're passionate about. They're funny, they're heartwarming, they're emotional. And we share all of this content on social media platforms for our friends and family to see. We share lots and lots of it to the tune of billions and billions of images and photos and videos every single day. And user-generated content, it oftentimes occupies this moment in our lives, which is the in-between moments. The times when you're in line or you're at a meeting and you just need a moment to take a break. But it also occupies a much more emotional, high-value place as well. It can often give us a lens into the outside world, and it can frequently connect us more deeply with others. To see people live a similar lives to us or just give us insight on what they do every day can really, really focus us and help us connect to humanity more. Now, as we move on, we can see that the amount of time that we're spending on social media is continuing to increase. And everyone has seen a graph like this at some point or another. And this may be even, it's increased since we did this look at how much time people are spending on social media. The reality is that the social media use that we're seeing right now will continue to increase, and the majority of the content that we're viewing on social media is user-generated content. So as we think about the importance of UGC, and as marketers, the name of the game here is attention. Where is people's attention and what are they paying attention to? And so if more time is being spent on social media and more of our attention in social media is going towards user-generated content, it makes sense for marketers to have a user-generated content strategy. I can outline that for you on our next slide to give you an idea of how we think about user-generated content. We think about it in three buckets. There's your influencer content, and I'm pretty sure everyone has an influencer strategy. And at the outset, we made sure to separate the difference between influencer content and user-generated content. But it's part of the scenario which you should think about in terms of your strategy. There's your brand fans, and brand fans are incredibly important because that's the foundation of your community. It's where you build your community from and making sure that you're connecting with those folks every day. And then there's this space that we play in, which is everyday life. And so giving people an idea of what goes on in their everyday lives. And the way we think about this is really around passion points. And how do you show people something beyond just the brand imagery on your social channels and your product and continuing to give them product messaging, but show them what they are passionate about and what that community that you're trying to reach and the customer you're trying to reach is passionate about. Because what that does is it fosters community. It makes them want to come back to your social channels every single day instead of just being hit with product messaging. And so when you think about UGC, it's really important to think about all three of these. And the first two are typically top of mind. It's the third one that takes a little bit more effort and a little bit more time to think about. And that's what the three companies here today are to talk you through and the importance of that. As we go to the next slide, we start to think through how brands should be behaving in their social strategies. And we think that brands need to be thinking more along the lines of a publisher as opposed to a brand. The days of just posting brand imagery are coming to an end in the sense that they're not going to engage your audience the way you need them to. So this brand storytelling can evolve from there and move more towards how do everyday people live their lives and bringing them constantly back to view your content so they can see how other people in their community, how their tribe connects with everyone else. And so user-generated content, as we move on, gives us the opportunity to really connect and find endless options for authentic brand alignment. There's funny content, there's content about travel, there's content about sports, there's content about arts. And the more you're able to identify what the passion points are for your customer, and the more content you're able to provide them that speaks to that passion point, the more engaged they're going to be, and the larger your community is to grow. I'm going to show you a few examples of how we work in terms of our social and how we work with other properties in terms of their social media as well. If we take the next step here in our presentation, I can show you a few examples. I'm going to show it to you from the publisher perspective because we think brands should be thinking about their social and their organic social in a publisher perspective. So Jukin works with a large publisher, and unfortunately I can't disclose the name of that publisher, but it is a large urban lifestyle property that you're all familiar with. They produce amazing content and very premium content as well. But in working with them, we're able to identify content that really fits their audience and able to create engagement across their social channels. So when you look at the typical content that they post on their Facebook page over the content that they get that's user generated, it generates 7 times the number of shares. It generates 4.5 times greater engagement and 3.8 times greater viewership. And this is just enables them to have a constant flow of content, at a very scalable way, because they're able to access this content quickly. They mix it with their premium content strategy so that they're able to continue to engage all the time without always having to produce large, big pieces or super glossy pieces. As we know within the social media landscape, oftentimes the glossy stuff gets skipped over, and it's the stuff that comes from real people that you engage with. And so that's the way they're thinking about it, and that's the way we encourage brands to begin to think about it as well. In our next example, we are working with a very large international sports organization. You all know the sports organization. It is international in nature, and it encompasses many sports. The goal for them was to really age down their audience and engage people on their channel. They have an OTT channel in which they wanted to engage these viewers. And so they came to us to help them put together content that they can put out into the world on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that continues to engage an audience in a way that they haven't before. And by showing regular people doing amazing things, they were able to engage their audience 14 times more than they have been in the past with the content that they have been posting of the professional athletes. And so it shows you a way that you can connect with this audience on a more consistent basis with content that already exists in the world. There are billions of pieces of content that you can find that speak to your audience that you can license, publish, and produce to make sure that they are constantly engaged as opposed to seeing the same brand messaging over and over again. Finally, I want to show you we have a unique perspective because we are also a digital publisher. So we have lots of insights into how user-generated content can be used to create community because we do it every single day. We've built 5 very large brands using user-generated content and then beginning to expand from there in terms of the stories that we find within the user-generated content. And that's the key, really, right? Every piece of content has a story, and being able to source those stories from millions and even billions of people is a very powerful tool that we have taken advantage of and built these properties. So we have very specifically made sure that we know how to package up user-generated content. And so we've been able to build it simply just using UGC. As we take a look at one more slide, I just want to give it just a sense of the size of that audience and how we're able to then take the next step and really use it across other channels, including OTT, where we see a great deal of engagement. And I show you this slide really just to help understand the difference between what we're seeing on the various digital channels related to traditional TV and traditional long form and user-generated content. Our channels are 24-hour linear streaming networks that exist on LG and Roku, Xumo, Pluto. But really, if you take a look at the watch time, people are sitting down and they're consuming this content more and more. And I'll take you back to the beginning of the presentation, really, and it's around the idea that this is the content that we're used to seeing and that if you take it from off of social and put it into other channels, as you think about your larger marketing strategy and your larger content strategy, showing people content that they're used to seeing in other media will help you continue to engage them across channels. This is really about understanding, as I wrap up, really the value of user-generated content. And it comes down to three things. It comes down to authenticity, speed, and data-driven efficiency. There's nothing more authentic than user-generated content. It's real people in real situations experiencing real emotions. I believe some of my colleagues that are following me from Olympic and Storyful will be able to tell you more about that authenticity as well. Speed, because there's so much content that exists in the world, it's really easy to access this content with the help of a really great partner, and allowing others and taking advantage of all of that content will help you in your production and your speed to market. And finally, as in a data-driven world that we're in, user-generated content often comes with a great deal of data and then allows you to test frequently of what works for your audience, particularly if you test on organic social. Find out what your audience likes, continue to iterate on that, and then push that content out into other channels as you develop your larger marketing strategy. You can learn a great deal from user-generated content because it's efficient. If anybody has any questions, feel free to type it into the box. I appreciate the time. Always feel free to email me if you have anything specific you want to talk about. But I'll turn it over and let my colleagues take the reins.
Thanks, Brendan. That was great. As Brendan mentioned, if anyone does have any questions, feel free to submit those into the moderator chat now. And if those questions are specifically for Jukin, feel free to denote that when you type them in. Now I'd like to welcome our second presenter of the day, Mike Griffin, VP of Global Customer Success from Olympic. And he will be talking about building trust and driving convergence with UGC. Mike, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Brendan. That was a great presentation. I think I'll probably reference it a few times in the next 10 minutes, and lots to leverage there. And I think just to introduce myself again, my name is Mike Griffin. I'm responsible for global customer success at Olympic. Most of you probably know us from the left side of the screen, right, which is kind of the traditional bread and butter of Olympic. It's how our company got started, which is curating and collecting UGC, putting it onto websites, and the typical conversation is that it drives conversion, which it does for all the reasons that Brendan talked about in his slide around authenticity and alternate ways for consumers to interact with brands and to see great content. As the landscape has changed and UGC has become more of a norm rather than a nice to have, it's become a requirement and a necessity and something that helps brands connect. We've seen lots of leading brands that we work with start to use it in more and more places. As I kind of go left to right on this slide, you can see Reebok, they're using it in their app. They've connected it to their rewards system. Monkey and Birkenstock, you can see they're using it in store, letting people interact and create and upload UGC in store, as well as see it as part of a real retail environment. And then on a syndication path, we work with a number of partners where you're starting to see syndication happen at a brand like Ulta, where they are syndicating to, they're taking retail to brands, right? So you'll have a brand that might be a CPG brand that doesn't have a direct-to-consumer experience, and then they're now pushing that and helping it. We're helping them. So if you work with us, we will push it to a retail partner on your behalf. So it helps Ulta sell more, and it also helps the CPG company or the beauty company in this scenario really push their volume as well. On some level, this has really all been about the trust landscape changing, right? We've seen a huge shift in the trust ecosystem. Before, brands used to own a share of voice. Now it's really been relinquished to a distributed ecosystem of trust. Edelman did a survey last year around trust where they asked a pretty simple question. If you heard about a company from each person, how credible would they be? And they took it from academic experts to everyday consumers to someone at the retail location who works for the company. And the third most trusted source was a person like yourself, right after a technical or academic expert. So there's still the high level of influence that a real expert might have, but a person like yourself. It's not even a person you know, it's a person like you. And how do you know someone is like you? Often that answer is social. They like the same things, they're interested in the same things, they travel to the same places. Super high premium of trust on that, and that's, we think, is the core and the heart of UGC. So it's important to really build that social proof and trust in as a brand, and you do that through people, building relationships with them. So as a brand or marketing manager or a brand owner, I think you have to ask yourself, are you leveraging the right people to drive the conversation in the direction you want it to go, right? And we think of it a lot about a curation conversation. So you're getting a ton of content, but you have to be strategic about how you kind of take that content and use it. We have brands that use a small percentage of their content, which is good. It means they're being careful and thoughtful. But at the same time, you want to sort of be able to make sure that you're representing the breadth of your community and the breadth of your audience. Today's consumer really wants to be in charge of their own brand experience, and they're taking the lead in discovering products through kind of a wide variety of channels. We saw a study from CrowdTap, showing that millennials trust UGC 50% more than traditional media, and 20% more for purchase decisions, and 35% more memorable than other media types. We talk to our brands all the time about letting more content make it to the site. And I know it's easy for us to say, come on, go ahead and push your UGC out there. And they often object with some version of, this content isn't really on brand. But the reality is, on some level, that ship has already sailed. As Brendan referred to, it's not really all about the glossy stuff. Your brand is already out there as a part of the community. What we're collecting and curating on are often your brand hashtags or your brand being mentioned in social media. So that ship has sailed. What we've talked to brands about is leveraging all of it that they see out there and trying to not just represent a slice of their community, but let that be the representative of the entire community that you're a part of. Your brand's out there, your consumers are dictating it. Can be scary for a brand, but it doesn't have to be. They have to just think about ways in which they can open themselves up to a larger breadth of what's happening out there and use it to their advantage versus trying to create a different story. And UGC is super valuable in terms of its ability to show the breadth of a community and show things that might not be what you would traditionally consider on brand as a brand marketer, but is great and valuable content and talks about the people that are buying and consuming the brand versus just the product. And it's a very sort of, I think, non-invasive way to do it. We have a couple of examples here of some brands that we work with that are really embracing what that means. The first off is Doc Martin. They put nearly all UGC on their Instagram feed. Red Hot Penny released a study last year analyzing the social media profiles of 110 high street fashion and accessory brands. Doc Martin won first place for their Instagram account and fourth overall on the social scorecard, which was super exciting, but we weren't surprised, right? They have a smaller number of total followers than some other brands, but they have a super high engagement rate, pushing 9%, which is very high. If you look at any brand on Instagram and the content they're posting, usually those numbers are well south of 1% in terms of how many people like or engage the image versus how many followers they have. But pushing this 9% is really all about them using this channel as really it's not an amplification of the messages that they're already connecting to on their site. It's a new way of interacting, and they're showing people wearing Doc Martens with interesting outfits and different ways to address things that are really interesting versus just like stock imagery of footage and product and their boots and things like that. They're showing people pairing it with lots of different things, and they're also subtly showing a lot of different kinds of people wearing their product that you might not necessarily connect immediately with a brand like Doc Martens. OPI Professionals did something really interesting, which is you've got the base brand of OPI. They created an alternate handle, which is all UGC, and it's got 2.5 more likes per follower than the base OPI handle. So also extremely high engagement here because it's all about community and all about their professionals and their salon experts showing off some of their latest work. It's the kind of thing that builds a really strong base following and really connects people to your brand. Four Seasons, right? You think about them being a super high luxury brand. They use nearly almost all UGC for their content, really embracing their community and who's staying in their hotels and the experiences they're having. If you think about any sort of luxury experience these days, from reward points to miles to anything that's really the high-end consumer that we all want and crave, you're hearing it's a lot more experiential than actual product. It's what kind of experiences are they having. Four Seasons embracing UGC on their super valuable feed, I think, is showing people the power of the community and the power of the experience, because these are people that are, because underneath the subtle messaging is always they're taking the time to do this, they're taking the time to show it, they're taking the time to tag Four Seasons, all kind of showing the valuable connection these consumers have with these brands that are out there. If it isn't obvious already, today's journey, very complex. There's a variety of combinations of channel, time, place, person, and point So you have to kind of really remember to hit those multiple touch points again. And content's expensive to produce and it's complicated to distribute and can grow old and repetitive very quickly. So I think rather than running from UGC, brands need to really think about running to it and making sure that it's in a lot of places because it's your community, right? Now, like I said before, the ship has sailed about whether or not you can defend your brand everywhere. You shouldn't think of it about defending your brand. It's about amplifying your brand and amplifying your community. They're already speaking. It's a matter of you embracing it as a brand, and it's a self-fulfilling cycle, and it's a very virtuous cycle that the more you embrace the brand, the more that the consumers are bound to reach out and talk to the brand. So it's becoming increasingly important to consider whether you're using influencer content, what we call IGC or UGC, bringing into your website, your product pages, your emails, your in-store marketing materials, all of that activation is super important, what we call activation, which is where are you using UGC and why. Everywhere we do A/B testing on stock imagery versus UGC, UGC is winning, and it's winning because it's authentic and it connects to the consumers, and it's going to be a little different than what they're going to see on the website or on a traditional product page, and it's going to build a connection with your consumer that goes well beyond just buying a product. So we did some research last year to understand consumer trust and found that they turn to UGC at almost every stage of the purchase path. I think we've all been consumers that spend a lot of time looking at product reviews. These are very much, UGC I think plays a critical role in terms of being almost a visual review for the consumer, where they can gather a lot more. It's not just about what it looks like, but what are people in the apparel space pairing things with? In the furniture space, what kind of homes are people putting these in? Do they seem like me? Do they look like me? And then obviously you're going to click on people's social profiles and kind of get back to that root of that. Is this person like me? Which is so important in the purchasing decision. And we've found an incredibly high rate of people that are very willing to allow you to use their content, right? Like since I've joined Olapic a year ago, the number one stat I've been surprised by is our approval rate on rights requests and how often consumers are willing to be a part of that consumer journey. It's typically 70 or 80% for a lot of our brands. Again, we work pretty heavily with our brands on the kind of strategies that you should have to ask for rights and how to go about it and how to do it. And our platform does that. But how it fits in that journey is really important. And the fact that they want to be a part of it and they want to be a part of your story says a lot. And to get that higher rate means that you're, in my opinion, kind of pushing on the right thing. So moving on to a great example of some things that we've been doing that are innovative in our platform, we were recently lucky enough to be accepted into Walmart's partner program, which means that brands that work with us, and this is just an example, I showed an Ulta example earlier of our syndication offerings. So what we're doing is we're taking CPG brands. We work with some of the leading ones in the world, and they get a ton of great content, but what do they do with it, right? They often have a website that they're not really spending a lot of time, money, energy, or effort pushing people into their website. They want people to buy their goods from retailers, right? But they're getting all this great content because people are big fans of their brand, whether it's a soap or a detergent or ice cream. So this gives them an avenue where they can take their great UGC. And then on the other side of things, you have a retailer like Walmart that wants more content and wants more UGC, but aren't necessarily connected to the brand in that way to get it. So building that tunnel, building that bridge between the two is a really exciting initiative that we've got going, and showing a prototype here, which isn't live, but a prototype of how that would look potentially with Neutrogena, one of our clients, and pushing that content onto Walmart's site as part of a syndication effort. And obviously a lot of these roads tend to lead, as we move on, to influencer content, right? The influencer content married to the UGC is so important. Brands are expected to pour about $2.5 billion into influencer marketing this year. And thanks to some increased trust and recent changes to Instagram, influencers can do more than drive awareness, right? With Instagram shopping really coming in much more strongly than in years past with that introduction. And they're essentially kind of brands like Instagram are playing the matchmaker for consumers to help them find new brands and products and increase the likelihood that they'll buy, right? But you have to be in that, you have to be on the court to play that game, right? And so getting the UGC out there and allowing that content to flourish really creates a strong experience. And in our consumer trust report, we found that influencers can do more than drive awareness. They can actually lead people to purchase. So it's that kind of really ability to be not as product focused, but experience focused, and finding the right influencers to make that happen. And we work with a lot of our brands through our influencer platform to find the right influencers, to incent them in the right way, to get the right kind of content that you want that feels authentic and real, because it is. No, I think finally, as we kind of wrap up here, I would say UGC can be a real relationship builder. Co-creation and collaboration are king. a new breed of like hyper-connected, digital-savvy consumers are eager to play a central role in creating a brand's products and services and leveraging that connectivity rather than trying to create a secondary message or a parallel message outside of it is really kind of downhill skiing versus try to sled uphill. The great news is most brands already have a highly active audience. Brand just needs to embrace it and try and figure out ways to transform some of these consumers into long-term brand ambassadors or even influencers. You know, and as we look at some of the stats that create a positive experience, like I said before, the ship's already sailed. Consumers are already mentioning your brand on social media. The idea is to really work with a strategic partner who can help you collect and curate and publish in a manner that builds and amplifies your brand's message rather than having a non-concerted strategy out there to try and push user-generated content. We'll show you a great example now as we move on to Nix. You know, in the age of Amazon, where efficiency and digital intuition are highly prized, companies have to go further than ever to capture consumer loyalty. And so you see someone like Nix, if you go onto their app, you go onto their website, you'll see there's UGC everywhere. They're really embracing it. They're doing amazing things like their gallery is we've seen galleries getting sorted by color of UGC and the main frames of it. And obviously it creates that self-fulfilling prophecy and that virtual cycle again of the more UGC you're putting on your site, the more you're asking your consumers to interact, the more content you're going to get and the more great content you're going to get. And with, you know, everyone saying you have to publish on Instagram stories 5 or 6 times a day and you have to kind of continue pushing fresh content out there. The good news is the content is out there. It's a matter of embracing it and harnessing it in a way that's really scalable. And you have to consider the full customer journey, right? Nix is just one example of kind of using those multiple marketing touch points to create a cohesive experience. Doesn't mean you have to see the same image over and over again in the same spot, but it means you need to see the same type, same character of it that connect to that product and connect to that brand. Just quickly around Olaplex and about what we do, I've mentioned a few of these, but just to give a quick flavor, obviously we're collecting user-generated content. We've been doing that for quite some time now. And like I said on the first slide, it's really our bread and butter, but we're connecting those platforms more and more as the universe is changing and the ecosystem is changing. We have a significant influencer platform where we're helping collect, find the right types of influencers. You like influencer A, how do you find B, C, D, and E that are just like them, making sure that they are legitimate influencers and not bots or fraud, helping to incent and pay them. The way I think about it is you could have 20 influencers, you could probably manage that on a Google Doc. You have 200 or 2,000 influencers, you need a platform to be able to manage all the execution and logistics and recruiting that go along with it. And then lastly, you know, I didn't touch on stories too much today, but a big piece of what we're doing is we're seeing brands leverage video at scale. And video at scale, we're doing some very innovative things across product feeds and using UGC and turning it into video, or using stock imagery and turning it into video at scale to really help clients who have needs of 5 to 6 Instagram stories a day, or putting video onto various sorts of advertising. How do you do a retargeting ad for 1,000 products? Are you going to make 1,000 videos, or are you going to have a scalable solution that helps you create those videos at scale with the right kind of messaging you want? So those are some of the exciting things that we're working with a number of our brands. And obviously happy to connect with anyone after this who wants to learn a little more about any of those pieces, or want to see some more best practice and case studies around things that we're doing with our brand. So you got my contact information there, and happy to follow up with anyone post this call. And really, I thank you and I appreciate the time. It looks like a great audience out there, and I appreciate everyone's attention as we're talking about UGC.
Thank you, Mike. That was great. Before we move on to the third and last presenter, I will put another call out for questions. If you do have any questions for our presenters, feel free to submit them into the moderator chat box now, and we will address those at the end of the session. So last but not least, I'd like to welcome our third presenter, Ebony Newman, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Storyful. She will be speaking about the powers and perils of UGC today. Ebony?
Thank you, Nina. So I appreciate you having me here today and all of you joining. We've heard some really wonderful ways to build a brand using user-generated content from both Mike and Brendan. And I certainly agree with all of that. And I want to just build on some of those concepts and take a little bit of a wider view of the UGC landscape, both from a positive perspective, but also to sort of warn of some of the things that we might need to watch out for. Because after all, user-generated content is generally posted on social media, and there are some challenges and opportunities in that space. So before I sort of jump into some of the detail, I just wanted to set the scene on the next slide by just doing a quick introduction into Storyful. So for 9 years, we've been the global leaders in verification and discovery of user-generated content or eyewitness content for newsrooms. And after that journey through building our media business, we've moved into a similar space with brands as the partners before have just spoken to. But we were founded by journalists who recognized that there was a huge amount of amazing content across social media, and capturing that content in order to tell the news story well was really important. And that's really similar for brands today when you're trying to really publish content and engage your audience in much the same way as a newsroom does 24/7. So we built the first ever social newswire. It's access to a whole heap of social APIs so that we can discover that content in real time using our technology, but importantly, human verification. And when you think about the news cycle these days, there's lots of great content out on social, but there's also a lot of disinformation and misinformation. So I wanted to just quickly talk through, I guess, some of the watch outs and what that means for brands as well. So if we just move on to the next slide, I can sort of talk through that a little bit. Now, these aren't my words. It seems dramatic. This was Mary Meeker's report last week stating that the internet is a cesspool. Whilst it sounds dramatic, I do have to agree to some extent. Over the last few years, we've seen some very concerning trends. I mentioned disinformation and misinformation, so fake news or agendas and narratives that can be not only impacting politics and news, but also your brands. It's very easy for anyone on social media to create a narrative that can change the course of your brand's reputation in a split second. So whilst we've got all this great user-generated content, whether it's about your brand or it's everyday people that are really positive and can be used to tell great stories, on the flip side, there's also problematic content that you need to be aware of in order to really own your brand reputation online. So I just want to jump to an example to really sort of bring that to life for you. Because as I mentioned, UGC is largely across social, but a lot of people think of social media as mainstream platforms like Facebook and Instagram. But at Storyful, we really think those mainstream platforms are the tip of the iceberg. So when we're looking at the social landscape to either discover content for our partners or help them understand any potential risks, we're really looking at this sort of iceberg analogy. So at the top, we've got all of the platforms that we know and love. And then underneath that, a whole heap of different environments that people are using to talk to each other, to share content, and of course, talk about your brand or interact with your brand as well. So they could be positive above the top, but there's also a whole array of other platforms. So Reddit, look, we would say that's kind of maybe not necessarily, well, it is absolutely mainstream now because it's a huge site, but you've got lots of other fringe networks and sort of darker places of the web like 4chan and 8chan, which I hope you don't have to spend any time on at all. But we do need to understand the full concept of this ecosystem in order to really own your brand's reputation online. So I'll show you a case study which hopefully can bring this to life. So we have a sort of think back to a bit earlier this year when Gillette released their toxic masculinity campaign. So this was sort of a look back at perhaps what would have been seen as a little bit of a chauvinist view of the world to really coming out and, taking a stand around what men in the modern age should be represented like. So I was actually listening to Mark Pritchard speak about this campaign last week. So he's the Chief Brand Officer at Procter & Gamble. Now, they did a heap of testing on this, what was actually quite a great ad, but they knew it would be quite controversial. So they spent plenty of time testing the creative to understand what the conversations would be that would emerge around the ad itself. What they saw was that they were able to do things like focus groups, neurological testing to really understand what was going to happen, what would be the reaction from people when they posted this. But he stated he had absolutely no idea about the velocity of conversation that would emerge around their brand. So again, some really positive conversation about how this was a wonderful stand for the brand to take, but then also some extremely negative conversations as well. And what we saw was mainstream conversation then dip into those fringe networks I mentioned to you, and then pop back out again with some really popular celebrities like Piers Morgan talking about Gillette being associated with it. So the reason I'm showing you this is to really just help you understand that once we put our brand into any environment where people are able to engage with the content, it's fraught with some sort of risk. But the opportunity is that by understanding these platforms, understanding the people creating content or conversation around your brand, can really set yourself up for success by using those insights to plan and to be protected when those things happen. So if we move on just to have a look at a more positive view, because I certainly don't want you to think it's all doom and gloom. As we have seen from the previous presenters, social media is an amazing source of wonderful content that you can turn into positive stories. I've just taken you through some of the risks, but it's also not only a place that you can derive content from. So user-generated content is more than simply just video. It's really any conversation or comment about your brand. So if you're looking at social media as a source of insight, you can think of it almost as the largest possible focus group or the largest panel in real time to give you real-time insight into who your audience are, what they love, what they dislike, some opportunities to engage them on a creative level. So it's really an opportunity not only to find content, as we've heard from some of the previous speakers, but also an ability to derive insight as well. Moving on to the next slide, I thought I might just show you an example of what this looks like to bring it all to life. So Halo Top, you probably are familiar with. It's a lower calorie ice cream. Better for you, I suppose. It's probably not still good for you, but certainly much better than the sugar-filled versions that are their competitors. These guys really wanted to make a difference or to put themselves in a bit of a white space comparative to their competitors in order that they could, carve out a piece of this large market. Now, what they did was go to social media and look at the content emerging around their brand. So looking at user-generated content, looking at conversations online to understand really what was connecting with their audience around their brand. Now, by looking at that, what they were surprised to find is that actually they had a huge health-conscious audience following their brand and creating content. So they knew that, yes, it was a healthier option, but they didn't think that a really health-conscious fitness junkie audience would be the type of people consuming their product and also sharing about it. So it really allowed them to open up a conversation with a new audience by looking at the insights that information told them. And that keto audience was one of the key ones for them. So not only did they use that conversation to discover a good positioning for the brand, but then they went to those posts, the user-generated content being created by their very audience, and then use that content to actually create the creative as well. So, you're looking to your audience to find not only the insight, but also then the content so that you can authentically and effectively connect with the audience on their level. So what this looked like in the end for them was actually using the content that was emerging across social each day to push through to their in-store and point of sale advertising in the supermarkets where they were ranged. So again, from insights to content to delivery, they're looking to social, to user-generated content to inform their end-to-end strategy. So just moving on, in summary from my perspective, I just wanted to sort of broaden your thoughts around how social can be used to inform your strategy. So yes, it's a brilliant way to scale authentic content through the discovery of great video, but conversation online and video online is also an amazing way for you to glean a lot of great insight around your brand to help you build a strategy and to connect with your audience on a deeper level. But I guess the watch out that I wanted to also, make you aware of, that for every amazing opportunity that you can derive from looking at social media and content and UGC, there's also the peril of brand reputation being at risk. So in a split second, your narrative can be changed by any consumer or any influencer online who might not have the positive view of the brand or the category that you're operating in. So really using social, looking at user-generated content to not only build your brand, but also to protect your brand by really understanding the flow of information across social and really staying ahead of the conversation by, understanding this in a deeper way. So thank you. I hope that sort of gives a little bit of a summary of how you can glean insight, create content, and then also manage your brand online.
Thank you so much, Ebony. And thank you to Mike and Brendan as well for sharing those insights about UGC for marketing. Twafika here has been collecting your questions, and we are going to transition into the Q&A portion of the session. If you do have any remaining questions, feel free to type those in, and we will try to get to all of them.
Thank you, Nina. The first question is, we've talked about UGC for publishers, beauty, and hotels. Does UGC make sense for specific brand categories, or can anyone do it?
I can jump in quickly. It's Brendan at Jukin. So we're licensing a lot of content to a large number of brands and a lot of different verticals. We have seen a higher usage rate in financial services, which is a bit surprising, but I think it's really about the emotional connection that financial services like banks are trying to make, as opposed to showing the standard sort of stock imagery. CPG is another one that we work a lot with, as well as telecom. So it can be used for everyone, though, because it's really about, like I talked about, the passion points of the audience that you're trying to reach in those particular visuals and creative. So the usage has been across the board.
Yep, and this is Mike. I would just echo that we've seen. I think as the use cases have expanded, I think probably before we were a little narrow in thinking about, this can really have an impact on site conversion. But if you don't have a site that necessarily converts, or you don't have a brand that generates a lot of UGC, then you're kind of stuck. But as we've seen activations increase, like across email and retargeting and in retail and in store, and using it as part of, we have brands using it as part of chat and messenger experience. The more the use cases have increased, I'd agree. It's hard to find a place where it probably isn't valuable. And consumers have become so normal to post and mention brands that I don't think there's a shortage of content for anyone we work with.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that as well. If you think about people congregating online, we're really just looking at communities gathering around topics that they love, right? So we're just in the same way you talk to your friends about the things that you love to engage in, that's really what we see happening online. So we've certainly found that, it's not just sort of mass trends or mass categories that people are sharing around. They're sharing around every type of niche topic or hobby or whatever that might be that they love. So I think it's certainly not a challenge to find some pretty interesting insight or content around almost any topic that you could think of.
Thank you. The next question is, influencers were discussed, which is bursting with fraud. How would UGC address the topic of fraud?
So I can sort of add something just by way of how we would approach content at Storyful. So we work with both publishers and brands. And I think the important part of what all three of our organizations do, so Storyful, Olympic, and Jukin, is that we verify the content before we provide it to our partners. So in that sense, it's a very brand safe sort of end-to-end process whereby we would identify the content and the uploader of that content, secure the rights to that content, and make sure, vet it for brand safety, make sure that there was no possible issues in a brand using that content. I think the difference is with sometimes when you're handing your brand to others to control, you sort of lose a little bit of that oversight in the process.
I'll jump in quickly, and I think that's the importance of working with a really great partner like one of the three of us, because we do spend that time in the verification process, making sure we cross-reference where that piece of content came from, who shot it, who's in that video. A lot of times, maybe some of your legal departments may be hesitant to use UGC, but if you partner yourself up with one of the three of us, that's a really true benefit, because it's our entire business, and we need to make sure that it's appropriately cleared.
Thank you. A few more questions. Is UGC alone more of an upper funnel or lower funnel tactic?
This is Mike from Olympic. We definitively see it as, I think when you talk about the site, if the question's around site and conversion, we're seeing it as very much as a lower funnel benefit. I think as we've morphed as a business, we've started to see it more and more as a lower funnel tactic. We keep pretty significant metrics on conversion, and we have a checkout pixel on most of our installations that allow us to look at consumers that interact with UGC versus those that don't, and how well they convert versus those that don't. And the difference is pretty stark. It's few and far between the clients that don't have a pretty significant increase in conversion for the consumers that interact with UGC. So getting it on those product pages and getting it in retargeting emails and things like that really have an impact on conversion is where we have seen it the most. And for brands that want to sort of think about top of funnel, we've done a lot of exploratory things like galleries and home pages that show kind of a wider breadth of product, and then allowing brands to filter on those, again, using some of our technology that tags and looks at identifying those components into categories or products or colors like I talked about earlier, and allow you to kind of filter that UGC like you might filter a stock image. But we tend to think a lot of time around the bottom of the funnel and really helping brands drive conversion. And some of that's because what the brands are looking for and what they want.
And I'll just add that just as the other side of the funnel from our perspective as well. Mike is right. Obviously, conversion at checkout with user-generated content is a big deal and makes a huge difference. We do a lot of work at the top of funnel in terms of brand awareness, brand campaigns, and it is used heavily there as well. So it depends on your execution, and it certainly can be used at both parts in the mid funnel as well.
Great. And one last question. Mike, this is more for you, but the others can chime in as well. How would you advise clients in terms of the number of influencers a marketer should use?
Yeah, I mean, I think on some level, I'll exclude budget from the conversation, right? Because there's a budget piece of that influences how many you would want to work with, and how much we can suggest how to incent a client, and that depends on kind of the type of campaign you want to run. But we typically defer to the amount of content that you're looking to try and get, and then we have pretty set statistics on what kind of interaction you can kind of expect based on an incentive payout and that sort of thing. So I think you can only ask an influencer to do so much and do things so often. So it's a bit of a hard question to answer, but I think we input it into a math problem of how much UGC are you looking to potentially get? What's the timing and length of the campaign? Are you looking to nurture long-term relationships to kind of make someone an ambassador? Or are you really just looking for 10 great pictures, right? So if you give us that kind of output, we can kind of work back up based on our statistics to the input of how many influencers that you need to work with, right? We think about a couple of different camps. One is somebody wants to run a campaign, right? They're running a clean up the oceans campaign and they want to get a certain amount to fill the gallery, right? Versus others we work with say, you know what, we don't have UGC for half of our product catalog and we really want it, so we need it for 500 items. If you get sort of that kind of bottom number of we want 50 images for a gallery or we need 500 products that each have 3 images, we can work back up to try and get the right kind of content that you want. And kind of the last camp is we just want amazing footage, or we want amazing pictures or something like that that are super high end. And that's more around, okay, how many people are really out there in the ecosystem that seem to have that? So admittedly, I'm not giving a perfect answer to the question around how many influencers you want, but if we have the end number of what you want out of the campaign, we have a lot of statistics around how many you would need to get there. And we hope our platform helps you manage it, because a lot of times that answer can be pretty high.
Great, that was wonderful. Thank you all. This is Julian again. We're at time, so thank you all for joining us today. We hope you found today's session interesting and informative. And of course, thank you also very much to our speakers, Brendan Mulvihill from Jukin Media, Mike Griffin from Olapic, and Ebony Newman from Storyful. We very much appreciated your time and insight this afternoon. We will share a link to the recording of this webinar once it has been posted to IAB.com. In the meantime, do not hesitate to reach out to Nina or me if you have any further questions. Our contact information is on the screen. And also as a reminder, this is the second of IAB's 2019 Make Mobile Work webinar series. 4 times a year, we bring industry leaders together to share and discuss core issues in mobile marketing. These webinars present strategies and insight on delivering effective, impactful mobile marketing campaigns, and occasionally feature case studies from brands that are successfully embracing a mobile-first strategy. Inspired by the publisher, ad seller, and ad technology leaders who serve on the IAB Mobile Marketing Center of Excellence Board of Directors, IAB's Make Mobile Work webinars are designed to help advertisers unlock the full value of best-in-class mobile marketing strategies that put the consumer first. Our next Make Mobile Work webinar is scheduled for September 4th, so watch your inbox for an email once we have finalized the details on what we will cover at that time. We hope to see you again. We hope to see you then. And once again, just a quick reminder to not forget about IAB's Inside Influencer and UGC Marketing Day, Monday, July 22nd in New York. You can request a pass by emailing mobile@iab.com, and we will include this link in the follow-up email you will receive by the end of the week. Again, this free-to-attend event is only for brands and qualified creative and media agencies. And with that, thank you for joining us today. Goodbye.